For years, fans have questioned whether Arnold Schwarzenegger really won all 7 of his Mr. Olympia titles fairly. Now, several of the bodybuilders who stood beside him on that stage have finally gone on record claiming those contests weren't as straightforward as they seemed. Let's break it down. The 1980 Mr. Olympia was supposed to belong to somebody else. Reigning champion Frank Zane was coming back from injury, and rising stars Mike Mentzer and Boyer Co. had their sights set on the crown. Zane himself had told people that Arnold Schwarzenegger wouldn't even be there, that he was busy shooting a color documentary for a BC. The lineup was set. The favorites were named. Then, the day before the show, everything changed. The day before the Mr. Olympia competition, Arnold announced that he would be coming out of retirement to compete. He hadn't stepped on an Olympia stage in 5 years. In 1980, Arnold shocked fans and competitors alike when he announced, the day before the Mr. Olympia contest, that he was making a comeback. No warnings, no build-up, just a bombshell dropped on a field of guys who'd spent the whole year preparing for a contest. They thought he wasn't even entering. The reactions came fast, and they weren't kind. Competitor Mike Mentzer was furious and even tried to attack Arnold at a pre-contest press conference. That's not a metaphor. Mentzer physically went at him. Other athletes like Frank Zane and Boyer Co. expressed pity that Arnold was going to return, lose, and tarnish his legacy. They weren't scared of him. They felt sorry for him. That's how far off the radar his chances looked on paper. Then there was Boyer Co., who wasn't interested in pity at all. He was furious. Frank Zane had said Schwarzenegger confirmed he wouldn't be participating, only for the entire lineup to be shocked when he made a sudden announcement of participation at the last moment, and further insisted on following the older weight class format. Upon hearing this, Boyer Co. was left furious. A heated debate broke out on the spot, and according to accounts from that meeting, Schwarzenegger told Co. to grow up. Robert Nalon, a bodybuilder and photographer who was in Sydney for the event, later summed up exactly how blindsided everyone was. Nobody knew that Arnold was competing in 1980 until the last minute. That last-minute chaos is the whole reason this story exists. Because when a 7-time champion walks in at the 11th hour against a field that already believes it has the contest figured out, something in the room shifts. And that shift, the fury from Mentzer, the disbelief from Zane, the anger from Co., is the first sign of a pattern that a lot of former competitors have spent years trying to put into words. The physical confrontation between Mentzer and Arnold happened at a pre-contest meeting with judges and officials, the morning before prejudging at the Sydney Opera House. According to Zane's own account of that meeting, as the meeting dragged on, Arnold and Mentzer began arguing, and Arnold told Mentzer he didn't win the Olympia the year before because his waist was hanging out, and wouldn't win this year for the same reason, at which point Mentzer lunged at him and officials, including Bill Pearl, had to break it up. Zane also recalled backstage chatter that made clear this wasn't just sore loser talk from one guy. Talking with Robbie Robinson backstage, Robinson told Zane he wasn't going to Australia to compete at all, because he'd heard the contest was fixed for Arnold to win. Robinson wasn't some fringe figure griping for attention. He was a competitor who decided the fix was already in before a single pose had been struck. And Zane admitted the comment rattled him. He began to wonder if he'd made the right choice by even showing up. So before the lights even came up on stage, you've already got 3 separate reactions on record. Mentzer swinging, Co. arguing, and Robinson simply walking away in protest. That's not one disgruntled guy. That's a field of the sport's best athletes independently arriving at the same suspicion, days apart, without comparing notes. And it's worth remembering what Arnold was actually walking into that stage with. He hadn't competed in half a decade. His surprise entry stirred heated debates since he reached only 80–90% conditioning of his peak form. He wasn't sneaking in as a sharpened, primed challenger. He was coming in soft by his own historical standard, against guys who'd spent the entire year dialing in their conditioning specifically to beat each other, let alone a ghost from 5 years back. That's the setup. A field that thought the contest was settled. A last-minute entrant nobody trained to beat. And a room full of insiders who smelled something off before the doors even opened for the show. What happened next, the judging, the friendships behind the panel, and the vote itself, is where the suspicion turned into something former competitors would spend decades calling out by name. If the shock of the comeback was the spark, the judging panel was the fuel. And the reason so many bodybuilders now use the word politics instead of performance when they talk about that night comes down to exactly who was sitting behind that judging table. Start with the plain math of it. Of the 7 judges on the panel, Arnold had a close relationship with 3 of them. Not acquaintances, not people who vaguely knew who he was because everyone in bodybuilding knew who he was. Actual personal history. Reg Park was Arnold's close friend and bodybuilding idol. Busek was close to him from his years in Germany. And Kawashima was a friend from Hawaii who often brought him over to guest pose. 3 votes before a single pose was struck, sitting with men who had personal stakes in seeing him do well. Compare that to what happened on the other side of the ledger. This put others at a disadvantage, including Chris Dickerson, whose own mentor, Bill Pearl, had excused himself from judging owing to his friendship with Chris. Read that again. One competitor's mentor removed himself specifically to avoid the appearance of bias. Arnold's friends did not. And it wasn't just personal friendships. It was structural. Schwarzenegger had been promoting the Mr. Olympia event alongside his friend and mentor Joe Weider, the co-founder of the organization running the entire show. He worked as a promoter for the IFBB, and during his competitive career, he'd earned enormous goodwill with Weider. Being that close to the co-founder of the federation, while also promoting the contest, gave him an advantage none of the other competitors had. Even the guy running the show itself wasn't a neutral party. The contest organizer, Paul Graham, was Arnold's close friend. So you've got the promoter's friend judging, the federation co-founder as a personal ally, and the event organizer as a personal friend. 3 separate layers of the operation with a personal connection to one specific competitor. In a sport where placings are decided by a handful of people's opinions in a room. Academic researcher John Fair, who studied the event more closely than almost anyone, didn't go as far as calling it rigged outright. But he didn't need to. Fair never claimed the contest was rigged, but illustrated that Arnold was given the most favorable conditions to win, that the crowd reacted negatively to his victory, and the media was shocked. That's about as close as an academic gets to saying the fix was baked into the structure of the event, without using the word. Then there's the posing itself, the part of the judging that's supposed to be the most objective. Side-by-side comparison, and even that got bent. Arnold was excused for repeatedly ignoring calls from the judges on stage to change poses, and stepping forward from the other competitors when in formation. In a sport where standing in the wrong spot or holding the wrong pose too long can cost you points, one man was allowed to freelance. He used secrecy, bent the rules in his favor while posing, attempted to change the rules off stage, and altered his poses to make his physique look better than it actually was. Author Alan M. Klein's research backs up how much charisma and control mattered over raw comparison. His crowd-pleasing skills might have also signaled judges to score him higher. That's a real phenomenon in judged sports. A performer who commands a room can shift perception even when the tape measure says otherwise. But it's a very different thing to win because your posing routine electrified an arena than to win because the room full of people scoring you personally liked you and worked for the same company you helped run. Put all of it together, the friendships on the panel, the promoter tie, the freelance posing, the federation politics, and you start to see why Chris Dickerson's own camp had to self-police for bias while nobody on the other side did the same. That's not a conspiracy theory. That's a documented seating chart. And crucially, this wasn't a secret that stayed backstage. The IFBB itself eventually had to respond to it, formally, at the highest level of the organization. The most damning reaction came from the IFBB, now the IFBB Professional Lug, which attempted to overhaul judging protocols after the show. At the November 1980 IFBB Congress in Manila, a resolution was made which forbade contest organizers from choosing the Olympia judges. Think about what that means. The organization that ran the sport looked at what happened in Sydney and decided the rule that let it happen needed to be permanently changed. You don't rewrite your own rulebook over a contest that everyone agreed was clean. You rewrite it because enough people inside the sport knew exactly what had gone wrong and exactly who had benefited from it. That's the panel. That's the politics. Now here's what happened when the actual verdict came down. And the room full of athletes who already suspected the fix had to watch it play out in real time. By the time the names were being called out, the tension in that arena had been building for a full day. And when the result finally landed, it didn't land quietly. 40% of the 2,000 spectators booed loudly when they heard the winner's name. That's not a smattering of dissent from a few sore fans in the back. That's nearly half a packed house voicing disapproval the moment the decision was read out. When Arnold was announced as the winner, the audience booed. Competitors stepped off stage, and some retired from the sport in disgust. Fans and competitors were outraged. Before the final decision, though, there was already a moment that had the room buzzing. Because the two finalists chosen weren't the two names anyone expected. The two finalists chosen were Chris Dickerson and Arnold. Frank Zane, the reigning champion, Mike Mentzer, the favored challenger, and Boyer Coe, sporting supreme conditioning, all failed to impress. It seemed incredible that Arnold, who many said didn't deserve a top 5 finish, placed in the final 2. Even people in the crowd who had no idea about the friendships on the panel could see that something didn't track with what they were watching on stage. As the two men ran through their poses, many agreed that Dickerson would take the title. He was leaner, had more muscle, and presented a better visual package. Then the names started coming down the list, and Zane, who was standing right there waiting for his own placing, remembered it in vivid detail. 6th place went to Roger Walker of Australia, 5th to Mike Mentzer, 4th to Boyer Coe, and then Zane heard his own name called for 3rd. 2 spots left, and one name still hadn't come down. Loud booing from the audience preceded the announcement that Chris Dickerson had taken 2nd place. And then came the winner. Zane's own words for the moment don't need much dressing up. The winner of the night, who else, was Arnold. Dickerson didn't take it well, and neither did the man who'd finished 5th. Dickerson left the stage in anger. Mentzer was outspoken about his own placing and accused the judges of corrupt scoring, and he believed politics and conspiracy had cost him the title outright. Zane, the reigning champion who'd just been bumped to 3rd, didn't hold it in either. Frank Zane reportedly walked off stage and threw his trophy at the wall. Even that detail has its own follow-up, almost darkly comic in hindsight. In his own retelling years later, Zane described what happened once he got backstage with his own 3rd-place trophy still in hand. He'd accepted the trophy, bowed to the crowd, and left the stage. And once backstage, the oil from his own body had spread onto the trophy, and it slipped out of his hand, hit the floor, and fell apart. The whole night, symbolically, came apart in his hands. And it wasn't just the men who'd lost, saying that judging had been off. 2 veteran figures in the sport, with nothing personally on the line in that specific placing, put a number on how far off they thought it had gone. Both Bill Pearl and Samir Bannout said they would have placed Arnold in 5th place at best. 5th place. Not 1st, not 2nd. 5th, the exact spot Mentzer had actually been given. The Mentzer confrontation from the day before also had a long tail to it. In an interview years later, Mentzer described in his own words what happened when he closed the distance on Arnold at that pre-contest meeting. On impulse, he ran over towards him, and he was surprised Arnold sat down. He'd scared him. He followed up describing exactly what he saw happen next. As Arnold went to sit down, Mentzer kept coming at him, wagging his finger. Mentzer's own later description of watching a normally supremely confident man fold in that moment was blunt. He said he went from being a frantic, hysterical adolescent to shrinking away like an injured child. Roger Walker, who'd placed 6th that night, wasn't shy about his opinion of Arnold's behavior on stage either. And Boyer Coe had his own colorful take on the conditioning he'd actually seen up close. Roger Walker said Arnold acted like an asshole on stage, and Boyer Coe stated Arnold had legs that looked like they belonged in a chicken nest. That's not the language of a room that believed it had just watched the best physique in the building get crowned on merit. The broadcast fallout was just as telling as anything said backstage. The show was filmed by CBS, but in light of the controversy, they never aired it. The Mr. Olympia was never filmed by an American broadcast network again. A national network had cameras rolling on what should have been a triumphant crowning of a legend returning from retirement, and they buried the tape rather than put it on air. So by the time the arena emptied out that night, you had a booing crowd, a runner-up storming off, a 5th-place finisher accusing the judges outright, a reigning champion smashing his own trophy, and a broadcast network quietly shelving the footage. That's the climax the whole sport had been circling since the announcement dropped a day earlier. What came next, the retirements, the boycotts, and the rule changes, is where the fallout turned permanent. A controversial win is one thing. A win that reshapes an entire sports rulebook and empties out its next contest is another. That's what happened after Sydney. Start with the retirements, because two of the sport's biggest names walked away in the same breath. Both Arnold and Menzer retired after the 1980 competition. One walked away a 7-time champion. The other walked away at 29, in the middle of what should have been his prime, because he believed the outcome had been decided before he ever stepped on stage. Menzer retired from competitive bodybuilding at the age of 29, maintaining that the contest results were predetermined in favor of Schwarzenegger, a position he held for the rest of his life. He never claimed he himself should have won, but he maintained that Arnold should not have. That last distinction matters. Menzer wasn't out there campaigning for his own trophy. He was making a narrower, more damning claim that regardless of who deserved first, the man who got it hadn't earned it. And Menzer didn't soften that stance with time. Years later, in an interview reflecting back on the sport's judging in general, he laid out his reasoning with the same conviction he carried off that stage. He said he got tired of hearing people claim that because bodybuilding is subjective, nobody has the standing to say a contest was fixed, arguing that anything that exists in reality can be judged objectively, and that there are objective criteria for judging bodybuilders. He added that at the 1980 Olympia, the only people who saw Arnold as the winner were the 7 judges and his closest friends. That comparison he drew wasn't abstract. Either, he pointed at a specific, much cleaner result to make his point. He also brought up a different champion's win a few weeks before the interview, where all the judges, competitors, and the audience thought that man should win. The clear implication being that 1980 had produced the opposite of that consensus entirely. Menzer wasn't the only one who stayed away from the sport in protest. The boycott spread well beyond one man's retirement. In the aftermath of Arnold's controversial win, many of the competitors vowed to boycott the following year's Mr. Olympia, including Frank Zane, Boyer Coe, and Mike Menzer. 3 of the biggest names left standing after that field simply refused to show up again. After taking that hit, many prominent bodybuilders, including Zane and Menzer, took instant retirement and boycotted the following championship by sitting out. It wasn't just the top names. The man who defeated Arnold in the 1968 Mr. Universe didn't compete the following year either, in protest. And a few other bodybuilders did the same. Even competitors from a decade earlier, guys with no stake left in the current title chase, pulled themselves out of the picture rather than lend their name to a federation they no longer trusted. Even the officials who'd witnessed the whole thing unravel weren't immune to second-guessing. Frank Zane, reflecting on it decades later in an interview, admitted flatly that if he could go back, he'd have made a different choice entirely about that night. He said he wished he'd simply skipped that Olympia altogether. His broader read on the whole event, looking back, was equally blunt. He acknowledged that many of the competitors voiced their displeasure at the outcome, that Menzer had retired in protest, and claimed the only people who saw Arnold as the winner were his friends and the judges. And that statements like these had fueled the entire controversy. The federation itself couldn't just let the boycotts and the outrage sit there unanswered. Beyond the judge selection resolution passed at that Manila Congress, the entire framework of how the contest was scored and structured came under review, because the show had exposed exactly how easily a promoter-friendly panel could tilt an outcome. Television networks separated from the competition, and new rules regarding judging were set in place. That's a rare thing in professional sports, a governing body publicly rewriting its own operating rules because of how one specific event had gone. Leagues don't usually admit that plainly, that a result exposed a flaw in the system. The IFBB effectively did. There's also a strange coda to all of this a year later, because the exact same pattern very nearly repeated itself. Taking inspiration from what Arnold had done, his close friend and rival Franco Columbu also made a comeback and won the title the following year. A federation that had just spent months trying to close the door on last-minute comeback wins by well-connected veterans watched another one walk straight through the gap it hadn't fully sealed yet. By any measure, the fallout from that single night reshaped the sports landscape for years. A broadcast partner walked away and never came back. A defending champion smashed his own trophy on the way out the door. A fifth-place finisher quit the sport entirely at the height of his ability. 3 top competitors sat out the following year rather than compete under the same conditions. And the federation running the whole show admitted, in writing, that its judge selection process needed to change. None of that happens after a contest people broadly accept as fair. It happens after one where the people closest to it, the ones who trained for it, competed in it, and watched it from backstage, walked away convinced something had been decided before the lights even came up. But 1980 wasn't the only year that pattern showed up. And the way former competitors have kept bringing this exact suspicion back up, contest after contest, decade after decade, is where the full picture really comes together. Sydney wasn't an isolated flashpoint. It was the loudest chapter in a pattern that stretches back across Arnold's entire competitive run, and one that former competitors have kept circling back to right up to recent years. Go back further to 1975, and you find the contest that actually made him a household name outside the sport, thanks to the cameras following him for pumping iron. On paper, it was close. Of the 7 judges, 4 voted for Schwarzenegger, and 3 for his close friend Franco Columbu. A 1-point margin in the overall round decided the whole thing. He collected his 6th Mr. Olympia trophy that day by defeating Columbu by a single point in the overall round. The man who actually finished with the strongest case for having been shortchanged wasn't Columbu at all, it was Serge Nubret, who'd come in with conditioning many felt was ready to win outright, only to run into a ban that kept him out of contention at the worst possible moment. Nubret has always maintained that his conditioning was enough to beat Schwarzenegger had a temporary ban not happened. And to this day, it remains one of the great what-ifs in Olympia history. Go back even further, to the years right before his 6-year winning streak began, and the pattern shows up in a different form entirely. Not a close vote, but a fight that never even got scheduled. After Sergio, Oliva defeated Arnold in the 1969 Mr. Olympia, and Arnold took the title back from Oliva the following year. Their third duel was set up as the Clash of Titans, and it wasn't to be. Instead, Arnold won his 2nd consecutive Olympia unopposed. The federation itself had blocked the rematch. Oliva had filed to enter a non-sanctioned event, and when his intentions became known, his federation application was returned, with Ben Whiter personally pleading with him not to disqualify himself by entering it. Even Arnold, by his own admission at the time, had tried to warn Oliver off entering that unsanctioned show. The result was a walkover title that fans never got to see settled on stage. That history has kept resurfacing in modern bodybuilding media, long after every man on that 1980 stage had aged out of competition. 4-time champion Jay Cutler, discussing the Sydney result on his own channel years later, didn't hedge at all about which side of the argument he landed on. He said he'd heard directly from people who'd been in the building that Meltzer claimed he should have won the 1980 Olympia, and Arnold won instead. And Cutler said he'd heard from people who were there that Meltzer should have won. That's a 4-time champion, someone with every incentive to defend the sanctity of the sport's history, coming out decades later and saying the same thing Meltzer had said the night he walked off that stage. And it isn't just retired champions talking about it in passing on podcasts. The competitors who lived through it have kept telling their own version of events well into their 80s, refusing to let the story soften with age. Zane, one of the very few men who ever actually beat Arnold on a competitive stage, has kept revisiting the specifics of that night for interviewers decades later, still walking through the judging, the panel, the posing, and the walkout in granular detail. The same story told the same way, year after year, because nothing about it has ever sat right with him. So where does all of that leave the 7 trophies? Nobody who lived through it, not Meltzer, not Zane, not Coe, not Dickerson, not the judges who later admitted where they'd have actually placed him, has ever disputed that Arnold Schwarzenegger belonged among the greatest bodybuilders who ever competed. The charisma was real. The crowd-pulling power was real. The 6-title streak that opened the whole story was built on stages where he simply outclassed the field. No friends on the panel required. But the 7th title, the one that came 5 years after he'd walked away, in a body that even he later admitted wasn't at its best, decided by a panel stacked with men who owed him personal loyalty, that's the one his own peers have never fully let go of. 5th place at best, by the estimate of 2 men who had nothing to gain by saying so. a federation that rewrote its own rulebook within weeks, a broadcast partner that buried the tape, a field of champions who simply stopped showing up the following year rather than compete under the same conditions again. That's not a rumor that faded with time. It's a verdict that Arnold's own rivals, the men standing closest to him under those lights, have kept confirming, one interview at a time, for over 40 years. Why the 1980 Mr. Olympia bodybuilding contest was so controversial, bar bend. No way Arnold Schwarzenegger deserved to win. Former Mr. Olympia questioned bodybuilding legend's 1980 win, essentially sports. The 1980 Mr. Olympia controversy, Iron Man magazine. The 1980 Mr. Olympia controversy that reshaped bodybuilding, the Bodybuilding Archive. Mr. Olympia 1980, what actually happened? The Bodybuilding Archive. Arnold Schwarzenegger versus Mike Mentzer. The controversy of Mr. Olympia 1980, Sportskeeda. After Arnold Schwarzenegger, Franco Columbu also made a controversial comeback at Mr. Olympia in 1981, Sportskeeda. What happened when Arnold Schwarzenegger competed in Mr. Olympia in 1980, Sportskeeda. The 1971 Mr. Olympia, the barbell. How did Arnold Schwarzenegger get away with the biggest Mr. Olympia controversy, essentially sports? The controversial Mr. Olympia contest of 1980, Iron Game history. Arnold Schwarzenegger, Ronnie Coleman, and others, Mr. Olympia winners by year, Sportskeeda. Did Arnold Schwarzenegger ever lose a Mr. Olympia? Sportskeeda. The real story behind the 1975 Mr. Olympia, bar bend. 44 years later, Frank Zane unfurls Arnold Schwarzenegger's controversial Mr. Olympia victory, essentially sports. 1980 Mr. Olympia, Frank Zane official website. 1980 Mr. Olympia Part II, Frank Zane official website. Mike Mentzer Wikipedia. Mike should have won, Jay Cutler on Mike Mentzer quitting after losing the 1980 Mr. Olympia to Arnold Schwarzenegger, Sportskeeda.